respond. The first question, we'll start with Mrs. DuMouchelle. What are your state budget spending priorities, and how would you adjust revenue and expense to support these priorities?
Spending priorities, let me tell you, I've already identified $300 million in the corrections department that we can reduce. It's right-sizing the budget. It is not just the per prisoner cost. Do you realize that 6,000 fewer prisons people are in our prisons this 3 years, and why has the budget increased? We spend almost 35% more to house prisoners than Ohio, and why is that? Value for money budgeting is the way to go with our budget. Giving communities and people the chance to share government priorities, what they know is the right thing to do, and they have a voice in that process. And I also feel that we need to incentivize non-emergency agencies to come in under budget and penalize those budget offenders.
Thank you. Mr. Bledsoe.
Well, certainly my number one priority is public education. I think it all begins with having a quality system of public education in Michigan, and we've got to provide adequate funding for our schools. As a member of the Education Committee, I have worked on Race to the Top legislation and other reforms to get more value for the tax dollars that we spend on schools. But the number one priority has got to be public education. If we don't have good schools, then we don't have much of a future as a state. Number two priority is public safety. You know, we've got to do the things that will allow us to keep the police on the street, to see that dangerous criminals continue to be incarcerated. We've got to ensure that people are safe in all of our communities in the state, Grosse Pointe, Harper Woods, and Detroit, and throughout the state.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with Mr. Bledsoe. What are your other top priorities? Why did you select them, and what actions would you take regarding them?
Well, in terms of other priorities, I think that's sort of indicated by the committees that I chose to serve on in the legislature. I'm on the, in addition to the Education Committee, I'm on the Great Lakes and the Environment Committee. And the reason I wanted an appointment to that committee is because of the importance of Lake St. Clair in our community. Lake St. Clair is really what makes us unique as a community. It's something that you just can't duplicate elsewhere in the state. And yet it's a very fragile ecosystem. Lake St. Clair averages only about 12 feet deep. And so we've got to be careful that it doesn't become one giant marsh. As a member of the Great Lakes and the Environment Committee, I'm in a position to help shepherd legislation that offers additional protections for our Great Lakes. I'm also on the Intergovernmental Relations Committee that's been responsible for mass transit legislation. We have got to have an effective system of mass transit in metropolitan Detroit. Our current system is a disgrace.
Thank you. Mrs. DuMouchelle?
I have nothing to this time.
Okay, thank you. The next question, we will start with Mrs. DuMouchelle. Every candidate is pro-job. As state representative, what would you do to create jobs?
To create jobs, the first thing we have to do in this state is get rid of the MBT. That is a job killer. My campaign, I go door to door. And in my door-to-door, I talk with people of all walks of life from all kinds of areas and all kinds of problems. The other day I was going door to door, and I just want to read an email I got from a lady who I met at her door, because she was giving me a MBT, just a horror story, and I just would like to read her words. She said, "For the records I have, my SBT estimated payments went from $2,200 per quarter in 2005 to $5,900 in 2009. Recap, my husband and I are small business owners. We're a contractor with 11 employees, all of whom we provide health care, Blue Care Network, full coverage, performance bonuses, a vehicle, 401K, and 3% match.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The time was up. I'm sorry. Mr. Bledsoe?
Would you repeat the question, please?
Certainly. Every candidate is pro-job. As state representative, what could you do to create jobs?
Well, first of all, Mrs. DuMouchelle is absolutely right. We need to replace the Michigan business tax with a simple, flat tax on corporate profits. Candidate Snyder has suggested a 6% tax on corporate profits, and that seems to make a lot of sense to me. But in addition to that, we need to look at every single government regulation in our state and see to it that those regulations are protecting the things that we value as a community, the things that are really precious to us. And finally, we need to clean up the mess in Lansing. There are businesses around the country that won't come to Michigan because we are regarded as having a dysfunctional state government, a state government that is far too influenced by special interest, a state government that is unresponsive and unaccountable. And so we've got to clean up the mess in Lansing. That's a part of economic development.
Thank you. The next question, we will start with Mr. Bledsoe. It's 4A and B, but they're very similar, so I'll read both of them and you can answer. The first part is, are you willing to be nonpartisan for the welfare of the state? And will you work across party lines and support a comprehensive plan to address Michigan's fiscal, budget, and tax challenges?
Well, it's curious that you should ask that because a little over an hour ago, I got a phone call from a good friend of mine, Bill Rogers, Republican of Brighton. Bill and I have been working together on the July 1 budget deadline amendment and term limits reform. And Bill and I talked for half an hour or so about how things were going with his campaign and how things were going with my campaign. About a week ago, I got a phone call from Larry DeShazer of Portage. Larry's another Republican, someone with whom I wrote an op-ed piece in the Detroit Free Press about a year ago. I have outstanding relations across the partisan aisle, and I've worked very hard to build those relations. It's absolutely true that we can't move Michigan forward just acting as Democrats or just acting as Republicans. We've got to learn to work together if we're going to solve the big problems that our state faces.
Thank you. Mrs. DuMouchelle?
Well, I agree completely with Mr. Bledsoe said. We have to work together in order to get these problems handled in this state. I mean, we have to replace that MBT, and that's not going to be easy. We have to eliminate the personal property tax for businesses. I mean, that discourages small business expansion, and less jobs are created because of it. We have to put an open for business sign back on Michigan.
Thank you. The next question, we will start with you, Ms. Oh, I'm sorry. This question is directed to you. You have 90 seconds. Do you take any money from the lobbyist or PAC programs?
I take money from PACs. When I started my campaign, I was interviewed by several PACs, business PACs, the Chamber of Commerce, SBAM, NFIB, all job creators. They agree with me, so yes, I do accept money from PACs.
Thank you. Mr. Bledsoe, would you care to comment?
Well, I'll just observe that I'm the only legislator in Lansing who does not take contributions from political action committees. And it's widely known around Lansing that I am sort of one of a kind in this regard. And it gives me a degree of independence that my colleagues really envy, I think, in many cases. I also don't complete the questionnaires that lobbyists send to all the candidates. And I have not been endorsed by a number of organizations, a number of traditionally Democratic organizations, large labor unions, for example, because of my refusal to complete and return and sign their questionnaires. I think it's absolutely important. If you want to be an effective representative for the kind of diverse community that we have in House District 1, you've got to be independent-minded. You can't be too beholden to one group or another.
Thank you. The next question, we will start with you, Mr. Bledsoe. Oh, once again, I'm sorry, this question is directed to you. You have 90 seconds. Other states like Illinois have moved to take action against Enbridge to pay for cleanup of oil spills and ensure the company does move to, I'm sorry, I can't read their states' environments. Why hasn't Michigan done the same to protect their states' environments? Let me reread this. Other states like Illinois have moved to take action against Enbridge to pay for cleanup of oil spills and ensure the company does move to protect their states' environments. Why hasn't Michigan done the same?
Yeah. Well, first of all, Enbridge is a multi-state, in fact, a multinational pipeline company. And it is regulated not by the state of Michigan, but by the federal government. I'm not exactly sure what the state of Illinois has done, but certainly if there are some opportunities for the state of Michigan to exercise effective oversight of Enbridge, then it should do so. Let me just point out that this pipeline that broke and spilled the oil in western Michigan also runs, the very same pipeline runs under the St. Clair River just a few miles north of Lake St. Clair. And so apparently the pipeline under the St. Clair River has a fairly severe dent in it. And so we have a very keen interest in ensuring that these pipelines are carefully monitored and our environment is protected from any kind of exposure to the kind of oil spill that we saw in western Michigan.
Thank you. Mrs. DuMouchelle, would you care to comment?
I certainly would. You know, in 2000, there was a 72-gallon pipeline leak near Jackson, Michigan. And a legislative task force looked into the pipeline rules in Michigan, and they concluded that we should assume oversight duties from any pipeline running through Michigan. You know, nearly 1 million spilled gallons later, nothing has happened. Don't you think it's time to heed the call for action? I'm for less regulation, but smart and safe regulation is a necessity. And I can't think of anything that is more important than keeping our drinking water safe, the drinking water of millions of Americans and Canadians. I believe that Mr. Bledsoe is the vice chair of the Great Lakes and Environment Committee, and I guess the question should be asked, what is the Great Lakes and Environment Committee? Have they taken issue with the legislative task force from 2000?
Thank you. The next question, we will start with Mrs. DuMouchelle. This is to both of you, so it's for 60 seconds. Where do you stand on restrictions on embryonic stem cell research?
From the research I have read, all of the advances in cures and possible cures have come from adult and umbilical cord cells. I do not believe there has been any kind of a cure or even a near cure from embryonic stem cells. So I really feel that we should stay focused on where we have had success and put our money and our effort towards the successes that they have had.
Thank you. Mr. Bledsoe.
Well, first of all, let me mention that I am not the vice chair of Great Lakes and the Environment, of the Committee on Great Lakes and the Environment. I'm a member of that committee, but I'm not the vice chair. I support embryonic stem cell research. It's very clear evidence that embryonic stem cell research offers potential for spinal cord injuries, curing a variety of serious illnesses, including Parkinson's disease. And the voters of Michigan in 2008 approved a constitutional amendment permitting embryonic stem cell research in our state. And I respect the will of the people, and I think that particularly our research universities, our very fine research universities, medical researchers in our state, need to be allowed to pursue research in that area.